Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. I'm Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law. Today's guest is Luke Yingling. He is the founder of a company called Rhetoric, and that company has started a product called CICERO that we're going to learn about today and how it can help legal education and also prepare people better for practice. So Luke, you started this company, Rhetoric, when you were a 2L in law school. So what on earth prompted you to start a company, and how did this come about?
Yeah, so I had a background in research from my time as a master's student. I was really interested in understanding the text of state code back then. That was an interest of mine. And so I learned a lot of interesting research methods, and I wanted to find ways to apply that to legal problems. And so one practical thing to focus on was verbal communication. And so we initially started with a slightly different idea for Rhetoric, but out of that grew this emphasis on verbal communication, looking in particular at creating opportunities for experiential learning, for active learning, to give students the opportunity to develop soft skills, to hone the skills that they need for things like oral argument, to practice for things like cold calls, Socratic method questioning, to prepare for job interviews, and to make all that specific to their needs by incorporating their resumes, the cases that they read for class, the things that are going to make this experience grounded and useful for them. And so that was an inspiration to me back then. It's taken a new form over time and evolved, but still very much the same focus on really kind of producing data-driven insight to help students propel themselves forward, become career ready, and make really compelling arguments and kind of hone those skills that they need to be great practicing attorneys.
What a fascinating and creative use of AI. I know that this is intended to build confidence and competence for students through the interactive process and coaching of CICERO. Why don't you tell us first about the different modules that CICERO offers?
Yeah, so we have quite a few. We accommodate a lot of use cases, and we're creating new modules for new use cases all the time. And so one of the happiest moments for us is when a user or an institution we work with comes to us and says, hey, can you build this? That makes us pretty happy. It allows us to create some new modules for those purposes and kind of grow the catalog of modules that we have. So to give you some examples, we can do cold calls. This is Socratic method questioning. So this allows students to put in the opinions that they've read for class. They get questioned like they might be questioned in the classroom, like I experienced as a law student. And then when they've responded to those questions aloud, they get coaching about how they could respond better. So it'll be able to pinpoint for them the parts of the law that they didn't really learn from reading the case alone. So it's a great way of understanding where are the gaps in your knowledge before you go to class. So you don't have to feel embarrassed in the classroom. We can identify that beforehand and help you really kind of cover those gaps with really great learning. And so that's one example. Another great use case that we see students really enjoy is interview prep. So we have a legal interview prep, for example, and in that module, a student will place in their resume and the description of the job that they're going for. And so what we do is we're able to look and see what have people said online about what's a really challenging interview question lawyers face. And we can bake that kind of stuff into the questions that are produced for our users. And again, it's going to be unique to their resume and work experience. So we'll be questioning them as an interviewer might do. They'll respond aloud and they'll get coaching on how they could do better. We'll even be able to pinpoint some places where they might be able to tweak their resume and make it a little bit stronger for that particular job. So that's another great use case. And then going a little bit further in terms of like experiential learning, we're able to produce modules for things like oral argument. We have one called Hot Bench that questions the students like a judge might question them in court, and it's all related to their brief. So they would put in their briefs. And this can be done whether it's preparing for a real case in practice or if it's a canned scenario like you might have in a moot competition. And as a matter of fact, we host our own moot competition called Moot Court Madness, which is judged by our product, CICERO. So that gives you an idea of the range of some of the things that you can do, but all of them focused on the materials that are most important to the student, whether it's their resume or the cases they read for class, and trying to package that in an experiential learning opportunity for them.
Well, there's a lot for us to unpackage here, but let me start by just asking a follow-up question to Moot Court Madness. So tell me a little bit about that so students who might be interested could participate in upcoming years.
Absolutely. So it's a really fun competition, and the concept is to create a bracket challenge where students across the country can face off head to head, and then it is all judged by Cicero. So whoever has the highest score in Cicero from that round advances to the next round. We start with a field of 64 and we work our way down to a winner. And once we have a winner, that winner takes home a $5,000 grand prize. And so we are currently in the finals of our 2026 Moot Court Madness, and we're excited to see who wins. We have a student from Illinois and a student from Case Western. So last year's winner was from Case Western. Case Western's attempting a repeat here, so we'll see what happens, but it's a great competition, and it allows students from across the country to face off in ways that they may not be able to in a traditional competition. And we've also seen that non-traditional students have an opportunity to participate in this in a way they might not otherwise. So we have students who are parents with young children. They're able to participate. We have some cool examples of that from the past. And so that's a great thing to see, that this opens up an opportunity to everybody to participate.
And how has Cicero learned? How did you teach the model, and what happens to the information that people submit to the model?
That's a great question and a common question. So it'll depend on the module within Cicero we're talking about. So I'll give you an example. For cold calls, we limit the model's world of knowledge to just the case that it was fed. So if we're reading the Reading pipe case for class, we give Cicero the Reading pipe case. That is all that is going to have access to for the purposes of that session. It's not going to be searching a database. It's not going to be looking towards anything else. Now, on our side, we've done special things to sort of expose the model to information about what is a good cold call question. What does a really hard cold call question look like? What does a much easier cold call question look like? This allows the user to have some flexibility in crafting their session so they can subject themselves to really hard questions if they want to, or much easier ones. But to answer your question directly, it really depends on the module that we're within. But if it's cold calls, for example, we're really going to restrain everything that the model has access to look just at that case. And then we'll also do some special things to control how much creative license the model has. So we'll turn down the temperature of the model, for example. But these are all really great ways that we can ensure that we're not going to experience hallucinations or issues with the quality of the feedback.
That is one thing I was going to ask, is how accurate are the responses from Cicero, especially for the case calling in the moot court?
Yep, it's a great question. So we've had dozens and dozens of faculty at lots of different schools around the country that use us. In there, using the cold call system, they test it rigorously. And the feedback we get is very positive. We've not had a report of a hallucination inside of Cicero cold calls at any point since it's been deployed.
That's really saying something in this day and age. So congratulations to you. I want to go back to when you started the company. So you're a 2L and you think that there might be a need for this kind of thing since you have a master's degree and have worked in law and policy. And so tell me a little bit about the process and how you incorporated it as a proud West Virginian in the West Virginia State Corporation Commission.
So when we began, I was a law student, like you mentioned. I was at West Virginia University College of Law, and West Virginia's home for me. And so we were proud to run the company here. As you may know, a lot of folks end up leaving the state and pursuing opportunities other places. So it was a neat thing for us. We wanted to be able to kind of anchor the company here and grow it from what was home for us. And so it's still home for me. There was even a time early on in the company's history where I ran the company out of one of my parents' barns, one of their barns. So there's more than one.
Not too many people have even one barn, but to have more than one barn. And so they let you have one for your AI development, huh?
That's right. And it's the ideal place to grow an AI company, obviously. So there are some famous stories of founders working out of their parents' garages, but not as many about founders working out of their parents' barns. But I think I was still working out of the barn at the point where we crossed the $1 million fundraising threshold. But it's been a great thing for us to work from here. And we're proud to kind of keep the company here, keep to our roots. And it's a unique thing for an AI company to do that. So it's definitely something that's kind of works its way into everything we do.
I love that it started in a barn. You're not working in a barn anymore, right?
I know, you can see my background. No,
Yeah.
right now, not right now.
$1 million gets you out of the barn.
It'll get you out of the barn.
So what do you find in the company's history now of the last 6 years to be the most prevalently used module?
So we get that question a lot, and it changes over time. So we see at different points in the semester, we see usage for different modules tick up. And so it'd be hard for me to pinpoint and put my finger down and say, this is the number one. It really changes over the course of a semester. We see early on in the semester, there's a lot of usage for the cold calls, students using it independently to become confident and ready for class. So that's common. By the time on-campus interviews begin, we start to see a surge in the usage of the interview prep modules. And that's not surprising. We know that some students will get in there and use it for hours per day in the lead up to an interview. So it's really useful to them. And then at the end of the semester, we start to see usage really tick up on hot bench and oral argument modules where students are preparing for finals, where they're going to be doing those kinds of arguments. And so they have an opportunity to prepare in front of an audience that never gets tired of listening to them, which is CICERO.
I want to speak about that listening. The idea of students doing this and then listening back, do they have an audio and a video option? And is there a transcript made of all of this? And then are they graded on it? How does that? Let's go with the cold calling. So I'm a student and I pull up the cold call page. What are my choices before I start any of the exercises?
Right. So once they begin a session, they have some options. So they can feed in the case that they read for class, like we said, and then they can customize the session to their needs. So if they really want to be thorough, they can ask themselves 30 cold call questions in a row, all about that single case.
Only the gunners do that, I'm sure.
That's right. That's right. Now, if you want to be a little less thorough, you can ask yourself as few as 5 questions. So it's really up to you. And then after that, you can also determine question difficulty, which I alluded to before. So if you want to ask yourself very difficult questions, feel free to hurt your own feelings a little bit. I've heard some professors tell me that those are truly very difficult questions. And so it's up to the student. They can kind of create their own experience. And this can also be assigned and graded by faculty. So this could be sent to a student by their professor, and they could complete it that way. So it really works both directions. But there's a lot of customization that can be done on the front end. So hopefully that answers the question.
It does. But so now I chose to record it and then I can hear it back. That would aid in my recall info later, I imagine, because I listened to it. It was a more active way of learning. But then once I finish those 30 cold call practice questions, how do I find out how I did?
Exactly. So we provide grades for all of our sessions. So it'll start with a grade, but more important than the grade itself is the feedback. So if we're looking at a cold call, for example, we'll look at every response that was provided and we'll provide really substantive feedback on how the student could have done better. So we're going to identify the gaps in their knowledge, kind of inform them about the things that they missed. And so it really goes much deeper than the grade. And then as a student progresses through the session, they can hear back to themselves their own voice. Students are often interested in knowing simply what does my voice sound like, which one way to find out is doing a podcast, for example, but another way is using CICERO. And that's also a really helpful learning tool. So you can think about, there's a lot of academic literature out there about multimodal encoding. So there's the visual aspect of seeing the text and the question that's posed to you. There's the auditory aspect of hearing your own voice, and then there's the motor aspect of using your mouth to speak. All those things in combination deepen the learning and help with retention and recall later. So it's a really effective way, not only of getting out the jitters and building confidence in how you're going to do it in the classroom in a real scenario, but also really baking in the learning so we can expose those knowledge gaps, close those gaps, and really help you retain that information over the long haul. So that's the answer to that question.
So we're going to talk about an exciting new partnership shortly. But before that, how prevalent is use of CICERO in law schools right now?
Right. So we have thousands of active users around the country from coast to coast, so West Coast to East. And then one of the cool things is we see once a user gets in, they often tell a friend pretty quickly. And so when we have like our Moot Madness competition, we see our usage begin to spike. Students are telling faculty about it. And so we're seeing this grow all the time. But one of the things that makes us most proud is kind of that word of mouth viral growth that we get when people really love using it and tell a friend.
Sure. That sounds like you're talking about some individual usage too. So is this both a system that a school could use enterprise-wide or something a single faculty member or a single student could access?
So it depends. So we definitely do enterprise-wide. That's kind of one of the traditional things that we do. We're also opening up more individual use. So students can get access to modules on their own if they need to. And so that's becoming a bigger part of our model over time.
And now you are expanding your reach even further because Aspen Publishing and Rhetoric have partnered to transform legal education through AI-powered experiential learning, and that is by partnering with you for the CICERO platform. What is that going to mean to CICERO and also to legal education more generally?
Yeah, so we're very proud of the partnership, of course, and we're excited to get CICERO into more and more hands, which is part of what that's about. What is it going to do to legal education? Well, you don't have to take my word for this. I think we're going in the direction of much more experiential learning, a lot of AI-based simulation. I think that's coming. Now, you don't have to take my word for it because we know the next gen UBE is going to be about a third based on practical skills, things like negotiations, client interviewing. Those are exactly the kind of things that we're focusing on in CICERO. So we're out there on the leading edge of what's coming with CICERO, and we're happy to be leading on that front. So I think that's part of what's coming in terms of how we work with Aspen on that. We're just really excited to get this to more and more folks, more faculty, more staff, more students.
And do you know yet what that's going to look like? I know this was just announced in February, so you may not, but will this be part of their practice bundle? Will it be connected to certain books? Will it be individually available? How's that going to work?
Right. So there are different options. So right now there are opportunities to get select modules with certain books. So you can imagine a book for a trial advocacy class. With that, you could have our hot bench where you get judge type questioning, our oral argument module, and our interview or our client presentation prep module. You could have a bundle of those things with that course book. And so having those things in combination, that's one really powerful way. There's also the enterprise route where folks can buy it and give it to all students. And then, of course, part of what we do is we have an admin dashboard. So this can be used as a standalone study aid style tool where the school just buys it and makes it available to all students to use independently, or they can begin assigning and grading with CICERO using classroom resources, using things like the class rubric for certain assignments. We can bake that into CICERO and help CICERO use that in its grading. So there's a variety of uses here. And then, of course, you can hybridize these, and some schools do that where it's part of classes as a really structured resource, but it's also just available to students to use independently. So all those things work.
Well, such interesting modules. Certainly the cold calling Socratic method is terrific. Preparing for an interview, I can really see where that would be helpful. Moot court practice, extraordinary to practice your oral argument and get feedback on that. You also have deposition preparation. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is an example of a module that we originally built for practicing attorneys, but it also has some really neat learning opportunities for students. So we built what we call Depo Prep, and the focus of the tool is to help deponents prepare to be deposed. Now, in practice, that makes a lot of sense, but for students in school, where does that fit? Well, it creates a unique opportunity for a student to stand in the shoes of a deponent and experience questioning as they would. So it kind of builds an empathy for some empathy for what does it be like to be the deponent under pressure. And so the way this works is you would put in the kinds of case materials you would use in a real case. So this could be an expert witness report. This could be something from an eyewitness. And that'll be the substance that CICERO uses to generate challenging questions for the deponent to answer. Now, a student can obviously role play as that deponent and answer those questions. And then in the analysis they get back, they'll see where are the places that I volunteered information needlessly. And being able to identify that as you're preparing, as you're kind of role playing as the deponent, I think that can help students learn for the future, where do the vulnerabilities come up for a deponent? How do I help coach them to be really prepared under pressure? So that's one example. It's kind of one interesting experiential learning example.
Yeah, I can see that in trial advocacy competitions, trial team competitions, and also trial advocacy courses as well. It's just fascinating that you've been able to build something in such a short period of time, which will be so relevant now to students in their learning journey, and in a way that leverages the expertise of the professors without additional time commitments, which certainly will be welcomed. You have explained the modules that you have so far, and you'll be partnering with Aspen and offering both individual use and enterprise use to law schools and law students. What's next for CICERO on the horizon? What are you looking to do, say, in the coming year, the year after that?
Right. So a couple things. One, like I said, we love it when people bring us new use cases. And so we're happy to see those ideas rolling in over time. And so we'll implement those things over the coming year plus for sure. But we're also interested in getting outside of just the law school itself and kind of running the full life cycle of a legal education, including at the undergraduate level. And so right now we're introducing something called CICERO Academy. And this is a way that we can help either undergraduates or students who have been admitted to law school and they're prepping for their first semester get exposure to Socratic method questioning about all the core, like foundational cases that they're going to read their 1L first semester for all those doctrinal courses. So if it's torts, we're going to give this student an opportunity to be cold called on Paul's graph before they've ever seen the inside of a classroom. And that's a benefit to them, but it can be a great benefit to the school as well to kind of get these students' feet wet a little bit. It may even have long-term help and impact for them when it comes to things like the bar later on. But the goal is that, one, the student gets prepared, they get the jitters out, they become more confident, they really learn some of the important materials. But the school can also use this potentially as a way to identify some students who aren't doing so well right off the bat. So they can do early intervention and help students and kind of meet them where they're at and support them along the way in their legal journey. So it's a great tool for that as well.
That's terrific. I have a use case idea for you. You're welcome to use it. I'll just take a small commission. You might already be doing this. Networking. I think there's such a challenge for law students today to know how to network and have those professional conversations, whether they're in the office or in social situations, especially because many of them were in college during COVID. So have you explored any sort of tool like that for networking or social interactions?
So that's a great question. So I appreciate you mentioning. I'll tell Aspen where to send the commission check for you. So that'll be perfect.
Thank you. That'll be terrific.
Okay, excellent. No, you make a great point. So we haven't made something just for that, but we know one common thing that occurs in the career service office is they put on mixers, they put on events, but it's hard to get students to participate. So we say, meet the students where they're at, reach them in their pocket. CICERO can be used from a mobile device. Students can do that kind of interview prep from the phone. And so maybe we can't get the students out into the mixer, but we can at least help them prepare for those job interviews. We can at least help the career service office increase their statistics that they really care about in terms of, median salary and those things by helping students prepare for interviews. So it is a middle ground solution that allows students to prepare and get some of that exposure. But we haven't built quite the thing you mentioned yet. But once we do, the commission checks will start rolling in.
That's right. The Patty Roberts Rhetoric CICERO networking project. Yes.
That's a great name. But we come up with some kind of acronym.
Yeah, I think so. Wow, this is really cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it rolls out with Aspen. The students who are using this, what sort of use time are they putting into it? You mentioned somebody might use it for several hours, preparing for an interview, but do you find that the students starting to use this, say with the Socratic method, that they continue throughout the semester or that their use increases?
Yes. So we do see the use increases over the course of the semester. Once a student gets into the platform and begins using it, they often become a repeat user, a high volume user, and that does increase over the course of the semester. So like I said, as they get closer to finals or midterms, for example, you can see that usage really spike and increase. And over the course of the semester, it tends to tick upward. But now for particular things like interview preparation, as we mentioned before, it can be hours per day of that. And so we're glad to see students get really high value use right before they go into these high pressure situations.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that it must increase confidence greatly, especially for, just students who come in more introverted than others and maybe without lawyers in their family. Is this something, with AI, faculty across the country in all sorts of institutions are worried about cheating, right? They're going to cheat on my final, that kind of thing. Is there a way that CICERO could be used for oral exam administration?
Yes, so that is a potential use case. So as I mentioned before, we can take rubrics for courses or for assignments and bake that into CICERO. So CICERO can be dynamic. The grading can be adapted to the preferences of the professor. And then, of course, it all remains in the hands of the professor. So if the professor doesn't like a particular question that Cicero intends to pose. The professor has an opportunity to review that and modify that in advance. Professors can even see the evaluation criteria that Cicero intends to use before creating an assignment. And so that gives them a lot of power over how Cicero performs and how it evaluates. And even once Cicero has delivered a grade on something, the professor has an opportunity to review that and decide, do they like Cicero's grade or do they like their own grade more? And so that's all fine. And that's one of the great things about the tool is that it has that flexibility to be used as an independent resource or as an assignable and gradable tool. And so yes, it can be used for that use case. And in fact, we've had people use it in similar fashion before.
I do think it would take some of the concern about cheating on exams that people are worried about with AI away, because you'd be able to do it by video and then you could see if they were looking at any other materials. The Socratic method use case, is it one that is iterative or asks something based on the student's prior answer, or are they independent questions?
That's a very good question. So we can do it two ways, really. We do have sort of more conversational module types where it could think up new questions and hit you with those on the spot. So it could be building off of what you just said in the prior question. So we have the capability to do that. But right now, what our modules do for cold calls is to create a set list of questions. And part of the reason for that is we know that folks want to assign and grade this. And so this allows the faculty member to create that list of questions, administer it to all students in a class, and have certainty that all students are going to receive the same questions. So we've designed it that way for that reason. We have the capability to kind of deviate from that in the future, and that's something we're looking at. We'll really just make that decision based off of feedback from users.
Well, I think I'm going to have to get myself a barn to rent so that I could start $1 million AI company. I think that's the only thing that's missing for my success. Congratulations, Luke. This is really outstanding. So the fact that you started this in law school is the most amazing part. But great work starting Rhetoric and Cicero and the partnership with Aspen Publishing that I know that we at law schools are going to be seeing more about as they start to market this new partnership. Very exciting. Before we conclude, I would love it if you would answer the final question I ask all my guests, and that is, what are your predictions for legal education in the coming decade?
Yeah, so I spoke to this a little bit already, but I think if you look at where the next gen UBE is going, it's a special emphasis on practical skills and things like negotiations and client interviewing. I think legal education is going to have to reflect that reality. So it's going to include a lot more experiential learning, simulated learning, exactly the kind of things that we're doing with Cicero. So we're proud to be right out on the bleeding edge of that. And one more thing that's worth saying is the whole concern around AI is that a student goes and prompts AI and AI gives back an answer, and then they use AI like a vending machine. They hit the buttons, they get out what they want. It's like a kid in a candy shop almost. And then that doesn't really make for great retention of information over the long run, and they might not have even gotten very good information to begin with. Cicero does the opposite of that, in that Cicero prompts you, you give your replies, Cicero evaluates the quality of your replies and coaches you in the right direction. I think that is an essential part of how AI fits into the picture of legal education going forward. So I think it's a model like that, where the AI is kind of flipping the paradigm on its head in terms of how it's used, and then a lot of experiential learning, a lot of active learning using these kinds of resources.
That's terrific. I realize we're doing this conversation by video, even though it's an audio podcast, as you know. I realize I didn't ask you about the SCOTUS cover page that is framed behind you that you said was involved, or Rhetoric was involved in. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So that was a cover page from the first time Cicero was used in a SCOTUS case. So we know that the folks there used that to prepare. And so it's a proud moment for us, kind of a landmark moment for us to know that in less than 5 years, we went from classroom to courtroom all the way to the United States Supreme Court with a product that we created.
Well, congratulations. Very impressive. I look forward to seeing Cicero be more prevalent across the academy, and best of luck as you continue to develop it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to listen to additional conversations with thought leaders in legal education, please check out your favorite podcast channels or the Aspen Leading Edge podcast page. Thank you.